It's exactly what we want to prevent. We want this war to be the last war, although we won the 3 wars, and if there must be a war in the future, we will win again, but we do not want wars. We do not want victories of wars. We just want peace.
In a shocking turn of events on October 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorists launched a devastating surprise attack on Israel, leading to significant casualties and prompting a military response. The Israeli Prime Minister declared that Israel is now at war and vowed to exact an unprecedented price from the terror group. In this video, Lieutenant John Dovey has an impromptu discussion with Tim, and they delve into the complexities of urban warfare, military tactics, and the challenges faced by the Israeli military in this conflict.
What is up, guys? This is Guns Uncensored, and given the recent situation happening in the Middle East, I thought I'd do a quick sort of impromptu discussion, and we're going to be chatting to Lieutenant John Dovey again. He's got a whole lot of experience when it comes to military background and sort of Western doctrine on how things are done in the world. And yeah, John, welcome back on the show for this quick one. I see you're sitting out in the jungles of Panama again. You've got a tropical storm pushing in there. Luckily, no enemies around or anything like that, so you don't have to wash your socks all the time.
Yeah, well, behind me, you can see there's a teak plantation. We're busy with a construction project here at the moment, and the most dangerous thing here is some of the snakes that come out of the trees sometimes. But otherwise, we're generally okay.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Nothing that you're not used to from South Africa, anyway. I mean, I remember you're from KZN, so you got all the mambas and stuff there. So we're looking at this Israel situation. I remember the 7th of October quite clearly. I woke up that morning and I was absolutely horrified. Look, you can expect these kind of things coming out of Israel because every 2 to 3 years it's kind of a rinse, wash, repeat. Hamas sends rockets. Israel tells them, "We're warning you." They go, "Screw you guys." They fire more rockets. Israel goes, "We're warning you again." Hamas goes, "Fuck you guys." Israel drops pamphlets over, and then they just fucking flatten everything where the bad guys are, and then they call for a ceasefire, and that's it done, and everyone forgets about it, and we get a regurgitation of past footage and kids getting blown up on the beach and missiles hitting houses and stuff like that. It's like history repeats itself. This seems to be a trend, and to some people, they'll remember that this has been going on in that area for the last 2,500 years or so, depending on your history, but it's well documented history. We're going to cut the religious aspect out of it in terms of the history of things like that. But what we saw on the 7th of October was absolutely horrific. I don't think I've seen anything like that in a long time. In the early days of ISIS, we saw that sort of stuff happening in their sort of attempted caliphate attempt, and that was horrific in itself. But this was like a shock in one day kind of thing, and so many people lost their lives, and people were kidnapped and taken in. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is the Western doctrine surrounding the sort of countering of this kind of thing. How does Western doctrine look at ground force invasions, hostage-taking situations, counterinsurgency, and that sort of stuff? I believe that you were telling me earlier that Israel, we've based some of our South African stuff off of the Israelis. They've obviously got a hell of a lot of experience in this kind of thing. So from what you know and what your experience is, what can you tell us about that kind of stuff?
Okay, all right. So maybe just get something out of the way first, and that is that the international law of armed conflict is very clear about what is a military target, what is not, about what kind of actions you can take, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a lot of misunderstanding about that I'm seeing in the media, I'm seeing from podcasts and et cetera. And let me just start with that, and then we'll go back and talk about maybe what the doctrine is, and because it informs the doctrine. So the concept is this: if you're pointing a weapon at me, you're a combatant, and legally I can shoot you. The second you drop your weapon and you're no longer a threat to me, I no longer have the legal right to shoot you. I must take you prisoner. So if you take that concept and you scale it up to, for example, under international law of armed conflict, ILAC, you're not allowed to destroy a religious site or churches or mosques or hospitals and those kind of things, unless they're being used in support of the military operation against you. And then the issue of proportionality comes in. What is proportional? And that is being really misunderstood at the moment. So let me just maybe talk about that now, going back to the doctrine thing. So there are three.
Before you carry on with that, I want to chip in here, and this is my no bullshit. I don't care about your feelings kind of thing.
Yes.
International law of armed conflict does not give a damn about what the media says, about what our own personal opinions are. It is an existing law. It exists there for a purpose. It's been designed that way. What we may see, or what the average person on the street may see as inhumane or a human rights violation or whatever is not the case. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care about your feelings. If a kid that's 6 years old picks up an RPG and he points it in my direction, and I take him out, it's not a human rights violation.
Correct.
If a guy is standing on the top of a Catholic cathedral with a 50 cal Barrett taking out targets, and I call in an airstrike and take him out, it's perfectly fine. So you can continue from there.
Exactly. So there are three main sort of streams of South African background to the doctrine of how we do it. Just to give a sort of a context, a lot of our experience in the SADF specifically was about what we would call coin insurgency, counterinsurgency. So the South African doctrine was primarily coin, COIN, counterinsurgency, and it was divided into two: coin rural and coin urban. And the concept was that of that was what is now called asymmetric warfare, etc. So the idea was that we were looking at a situation where we had insurgents, or essentially in civilian clothing, mostly who would hide amongst the population, and there were certain ways that we would approach that to counter their threats, and that was primarily rural. The urban then turned into an urban situation when we'd go into townships. And that changed the whole way that we would have approach things, because we had to be exceptionally careful because there were civilians, and these people were being mixed in amongst civilians. So a lot of the doctrine about how to deal with that, and a lot of the background of most SADF guys, ordinary infantry, etc., was based on that kind of thinking and that kind of mindset and that doctrine. Then the actual concept of urban warfare, which is now morphed into another word, which is the acronym is MOUT, Military Operations in Urban Terrain. That is completely different. And the people who started actually exploring and practicing that first were the Special Forces. And if you read Jack Krief's book, he actually explains that he was the project responsible for developing the Special Forces doctrine. And in there, he says he consulted every possible source he could find, including from watching movies and from reading books and what have you. And he took that and he synthesized out of that the beginnings of the SF doctrine. Obviously, that has progressed a lot. I know the person who wrote the most recent manual on the SF urban, the urban and advanced urban, is Colonel Latoy, and the difference between the two is a long period of time and a lot of experience and a lot of input. When you mentioned the Israelis during the installation years in South Africa, they were involved in helping us, provide us with arms. We all know about the Galil, which became the R4, and various other things. And I do know anecdotally that they were involved in assisting with some of our doctrine and our training, etc. as well. We also got input. I remember in 1985, I was in national service, and there were two warrant officers, sergeant majors from the British Army, who came out to South Africa. They were contracted by the South African Army to come out and assist first at infantry school, and then just before we deployed during the state of emergency in 85, to actually give us their background and their doctrine and approach to things based on their experiences in Northern Ireland. So that is kind of the basic background from a military perspective. And then we've got another factor as well. If you remember, 1976, the police formed the Special Task Force. And the Special Task Force was formed specifically because of a hostage situation in Pretoria, which did not go well. And they were formed in reaction to that. And they then started developing their own doctrine that was based on the concept of a more policing approach to things, but a paramilitary approach at the same time. And they developed a very comprehensive urban doctrine for all the things that we now think of as urban warfare, things like room clearing, things like hostage rescue, etc., etc. And so I've been fortunate. I was on a team when I was working internationally with a guy, Mac, who was an instructor at their school for 8 years. And I remember very clearly Mac and one of the American guys who was a Marine veteran having a shouting match with each other while they debated small things about the doctrine, the tactics to use in the urban environment, things about when you enter a room, what side you enter the room, how you enter the room, the angles that you used, who goes first, who goes last. And there's a whole bunch of really technical stuff that they debated vigorously. And what was interesting about that debate was eventually Mac turned around to the American and he was like, okay, so you were in Fallujah and all the things that happened. He says, how many guys died? And he says, look at the task force. We've been how many years? And we've had 0 deaths going into that kind of situation. So they had a serious, vigorous debate. Eventually, we worked it out and everybody figured out what was a common sort of ground and we figured out what was appropriate for our circumstances. But the point is that this is not something that is hard and fast. It's something that everybody adapts to their philosophy of what they're doing, the situation that they're doing, etc. Okay, so that as a sort of as a background, just to give you an idea about the difference between warfare, urban warfare, or MOUT, military operations, urban terrain, versus coin urban, which is a completely different mindset. And this is how it goes. If I'm doing coin urban, I'm going to go house to house. We're going to surround the house. We're going to then knock on the door and we're going to declare the authority and say we're going to come in and search. And we're doing all of those kind of policing type of tasks. When it is urban warfare or MOUT, that's not the case. I'll go as an army engineer and I will place a breaching charge and I'll blow a hole in the wall and won't even go near the door and we'll throw in a fragmentation grenade or a flashbang. But if it's war, probably a fragmentation grenade. So anyone who's in the room actually is injured or dies, and then we'll go into the room and we'll do what we need to do to clear the room and clear the house. So you hear what I'm saying, that the philosophy is completely different. The philosophy of the one is we preserve the civilian structures, we preserve a sense of these are your rights, and we have to tread carefully around your rights, and we've got to have the kind of the warrant type thing or the authority. We have to have an authority to do it. When it comes to an urban warfare situation, that falls by the wayside because now everybody in that area is seen to be a combatant unless proven otherwise. So I'm looking at what's happening with the Israelis going into Gaza at the moment, and it's clear to me that they have got a divided mindset. They have got 2 major objectives. The one is very explicitly stated by the president of Israel, is to destroy, take out, kill, whatever word you want to use, all of these structures and personnel within Hamas, and those who were involved in supporting the attack on Israel and the butchering of the Israeli citizens. So that is their primary, their one primary goal. The other primary goal is to rescue hostages. So you can see that they are going in with a divided mind, and because they're going with a divided mind, I am very sure that they have already sat down and they've done the calculus and they've figured out we are prepared to accept a certain level of casualties because we have this divided objective. If they were simply going to be destroying Hamas, they would do it with rockets and standoff, whatever standoff weapons that they chose to use. The only reason that they're actually going in on the ground is because of the hostages. So the calculus for that is, I mean, your normal calculus for that type of operation for a ground invasion is probably about 10% casualties. Casualties being a combination of dead and wounded. So effectively, anybody who's ineffective counts towards your casualties. I've been hearing people talking about them saying that they would be able to justify, in terms of their civilian population, etc., up to 30% deaths. So that's not casualties. And that's horrific. I mean, now we're talking about 50% casualties with 30% are death. So they go in knowing that they are exchanging their young lifeblood to attempt to achieve their two objectives. With the primary one for them, I honestly believe, is to rescue the hostages, and then the secondary one to ensure that doesn't happen again. That what they do becomes such a deterrent that everyone else in the region will go, well, if we poke the bear, we're going to die. And I think that that's the objective and their motive behind the assault part of it. Okay.
Looking at the deaths so far that I've seen,
Yeah.
we're on some of the similar groups together.
Yeah.
One of the guys posted. They're guys that are brigadier generals, colonels, majors,
Correct.
captains that are on the upper list of guys
Correct. Okay.
dying.
So this is the other problem about urban warfare, and to understand what's going on here, you need a little bit of context and history. The first one is one I point to every time. I pointed to this when we spoke about previously. We spoke about the Ukraine, and I'll point to this again because it is the classic modern example, and that's the Battle of Grozny. There were two battles in Grozny. The first one, the Russians went in and they got hammered. They got absolutely hammered. The second one, they didn't go in. They did a stand-up bombardment, and then they rolled over the rubble. So if we're talking about that, that gives you a very stark example of exactly the mentality I'm talking about. The Israelis cannot bomb Gaza to rubble because they have hostages. So they have to go in. And the problem that the Russians experienced, and also, by the way, that the Israelis experienced when they went up against Hezbollah in, I think, 2007, is that when you go in on the ground, you now are facing a 360-degree war. So coming out of the manhole covers from sewage drains, from coming from the roof, you roll past and they come up behind you and they're shooting from behind you. So above you, below you, behind you, to the sides. It is a 360-degree war. And then you throw in the complications of things like the use of drones, and there's no threat, and a drone pops up and it doesn't ping on any of the normal sort of electronic warfare type of early warnings systems, because it is a small hobbyist / commercial type drone that can drop one grenade. And now you're finding that they are starting to target people that are clearly leaders, that they are using the drones in an indirect kind of sniping role, if I can say that. The other problem that Israel faces with their Merkava tanks is that the Merkava is extremely vulnerable, as was proven in 2007, to the modern generations of the anti-tank guided missiles, the ATGMs. And we know for a fact that Hezbollah had them in 2007, and it is highly unlikely that Hamas does not have access to the same type of weapons, if not exactly the same weapons. So if I was doing a threat assessment rolling into Gaza today, I would go, all right, so we have an issue. We've got to have integrated armor and infantry, because if you put armor on its own, it's vulnerable to infantry. You put infantry on its own, it's vulnerable to armor. So they're rolling in with infantry deployed on foot, surrounding the armor, because that gives you the early warning. It gives you the individual, the ability to individually to fight against individuals who are attacking you, and then you've got the armor to take out the more hardened targets. All right, so that's the kind of situation, is that everybody is potentially an enemy. So you'll drive right past somebody who's standing there and is all innocent, man, woman, child, whatever. They don't have a weapon. They're all standing there and going, oh, crying, or they're going, hello, you're our heroes, whatever they are. And you're 50 meters down the road, and that guy leans down into the rubble and he picks out an ATGM and he shoots one of your tanks from the rear. That's the warfare that they are fighting right now. And it is an exceptionally complex, difficult warfare, because there's another factor. And that factor is Command and control is exceptionally difficult because you're fighting there was a Marine general who called it the 2-block war, and he also described it as the corporal war. So you're not fighting a war where all your various elements are in constant support of each other, which is the standard for all arms warfare, where you'll have your armor, you'll have your dismounted infantry, you'll have your artillery, you'll have your indirect fire support from mortars, you'll have your air support, you'll have all of those things that all work in a coordinated way, generally at a slightly higher HQ level, where there's a war room that actually then allocates those assets and responds to calls for fire and for ECAS, emergency close air support. All of those things are coordinated and controlled at a higher level with people who are literally dedicated, trained, and experienced in doing so. So you'll get, like, for example, let's say at the brigade level. At the brigade, you've got the 3 to 5 battalions under you, depending on your structure, and each battalion then has 3 to 5 companies, each company 3 to 5 platoons. So the whole structure goes down, and all those things work upwards. And at the brigade level, you'll have organic assets such as artillery and indirect air. They'll have what the US call the JTAC, the Joint Tactical Air Controllers. On the ground with the forward elements, you'll probably have forward air controllers that will call for fire support. Now, what happens is that whole battle space has to be managed very carefully, because if you've got a plane coming in to give strafing fire in support of a platoon a platoon in contact, and that plane comes in on its attack dive, or a helicopter comes in or whatever, and it then flies smack dab into your own artillery rounds that are firing at another target, you've got a problem, and you've got to manage that airspace, and it's exceptionally complex to do so. So now what happens is they go into an urban type area, and the communication and the tactical situation immediately devolves down to the very smallest unit, and that can be a platoon, but essentially it means that the smallest unit, which is a section or a squad in American terms, is fighting on in a block, on a street. There are some if you remember the movie Full Metal Jackets, the second half of the movie, they were involved in a battle in Vietnam. And Stanley Kubrick, when he did the movie, he chose a battle in Vietnam that was literally fought on the single side of one street. And that's what that is. So you want some kind of footage, an idea of how difficult that is, that you can get a feeling from that. Now take that complexity of one small battle in one series of streets, maybe a crossroads. It's always at a crossroads where it becomes complex. You take that and you multiply it by 100 times. And if you look at the theory and the doctrine, is that you can't control more than 7 things at the same time. You can't communicate more than 3, and you can't control, in terms of command and control, more than 7. And this is one of the reasons why the military is structured the way they do in threes, is specifically so you can communicate with your mobile elements, and in 7s means you can throw in things like you've got your troops in combat, and you can throw in your air support, you can throw in your indirect fire, and all of those then add to the 7. But you call for fire, indirect fire or air support, and that goes up to battalion level, then goes to brigade level for them to actually figure out how it fits and how they can plan it. So you might sit for an eternity in combat, which might be 3 minutes. That's an eternity with no support fire, and in that time you can lose half your people. So the complexity of the battlefield is huge. It's incredible. So what I'm starting to see, and it's very, very difficult because the Israeli OPSEC, the operational security, is incredibly good. So this is not like Ukraine where they put everything out in the media, and while they're fighting, they are live streaming. What you're doing there is they're literally not revealing to anybody the actual doctrine and tactics that they're exercising on the ground, which is a good thing. They are spot on.
Yeah, no, it's a very good thing. And from what I can see so far, and what I can sort of predict that's possibly going on, and I don't know if you've seen maps of the combat zone itself.
Yeah,
is coming in they've come in strong on the north and down the beach.
Yeah,
and then smack in the middle, just before Gaza City, they're moving in, and it looks like they're pushing across.
Yes.
They're opening up a sector,
yes,
a wide sector that's cutting the whole of Gaza in half, and it looks like
Exactly.
they're going to just focus on that northern section. That's why they've been telling everyone to fuck off down to Wadi Gaza.
100%. 100%. So,
And that's why Hamas is telling the civilian population that this is bullshit. Don't go down to Wadi Gaza. Stay where you are, because they're obviously planning guerrilla warfare.
And because
They're going
they
to
want
pop
it
up
to be a
between the
shield,
population.
and they want all the
Yeah.
media attention of so-called non-combatants. They want the media attention. So okay, so
And just a side thing on the media side of things, the journalists and stuff, the international journalists that are in that area currently, the fact that they're there for the bang bang to try and get that story, they're putting their lives at such a high risk.
yep,
Doing what they're doing.
yeah,
They're putting themselves in artillery range. They're putting themselves for rocket fire. When movement of troops does move in, if I'm moving to a combat zone, it's going to be difficult to differentiate between a fighter and a guy with a camera. A guy with a camera on his shoulder is going to look like a guy with an RPG at a distance.
I
Identifying those kind of things is difficult.
I beg to differ for two reasons. First one is that they deliberately do the whole press thing on their body armor, so it's quite clear that this is not a fighter. Number one. Number two, any decent army that is preparing for that kind of situation, and Israel has got to be one of the top militaries in the world when it comes to that, because they know that they live with a constant existential threat. They're going to train for the shoot don't shoot scenario. On the bluff in Durban, there we have a shoot room that has the video equipment and a ballistic wall where you stand and you fire your live rounds into the wall. But what you're doing is you're shooting at the video that's projected there, and the technology is there that it picks up using the light that comes through the screen who you've shot and who you haven't shot. And the main focus of that training is to train that shoot don't shoot process, because you take it when you start, you're like, it takes you 20 seconds to decide who to shoot, and by the time you finish, you should be doing it in under a second. That you're so accustomed to making the call, and then they throw in things at you where you start out and there's some guy holding an AK-47 and he's holding a hostage in front of him, and you must shoot the guy, and that's obvious. By the end of it, you've got some guy holding some guy, and then there's a kid peeking out from behind them. The person who's armed is the 5-year-old kid, and you've got to make those mental decisions that got to go into that OODA loop process so fast and accurately that you should be 98-99% accurate even in under a second. And I have no doubt whatsoever that the Israelis they have included this in their training for a long time. They're the people who've actually developed a lot of the technology that other people are using to do that kind of training. So, but the problem with that is that 98% is not 100%.
No, exactly.
That is the problem. And the other problem is that indirect fire weapons, nobody's your friend. If an artillery round comes in, or a mortar round comes in, or a rocket comes in, and they are targeted at something,
it's going to be...
okay, so the other thing that people don't understand is that in terms of people on the ground, most of the wounds and most of the deaths are not actually from the round itself. They're from what they call secondary shrapnel. So the stones that are on the floor are the things that kill you, because the explosion actually throws those out in a pretty predictable pattern, and that's what actually wounds and kills more than the actual round itself. So I mean, you're going to get what is correctly termed collateral damage, which has become a bug word, but collateral damage is where you are exercising your absolute legal proportional actions, and there are people there that are unavoidably killed or wounded or wounded by virtue of your actions, and that is completely legal and acceptable. That is under the law. They should not be there, and you have taken the best care that you can not to hit them. That is what collateral damage is. Somebody that is shot or wounded or killed outside of those criteria is not actually collateral damage. Then it's something that should be investigated and after the fact and Monday morning quarterbacks or whatever you want to call it. So I would say that 98% of the time, whether it's journalists or whether it's civilians or whatever, 98% of the time that call is going to be an accurate call. There are two issues that affect that, though. The first one is level of experience and training. And we know that Israel has a very good level of experience in training generally. As they cycle through the war, they're going to have more and more of the reservists whose training is maybe not up to the minute. They may be 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years out of training. Side note, sidebar. I was very interested to hear that when Israel put out the call for their reservists, that they were expecting a 60% response rate to their call. Do you know what percentage they got?
Probably like 80%.
Try 150%. 150% response to their call up. So they had people arriving from all over the world who paid their own flight, their own expenses, who were not called up. Wow. Which shows you the heart and passion and belief that they have and the response to this barbarous attack. So we have people, and I happen to know some personally, that have literally were not called up, that packed their bags, fished their old uniforms out, climbed on a plane at their own expense and flew home to Israel to go and fight for their country. And with that level of passion and drive, I have no doubt that their morale is very good. Anyway, so that aside, coming back to the doctrine and tactics, the second issue, I said the first one is about the training, etc. The second issue is the fog of war. The fog of war is interesting because it has a whole lot of different aspects to it. But one aspect is, as I was saying, you have to escalate decisions on things like managing the battle space, managing the indirect fire, managing air support, etc. They have to go up a level, battalion, brigade, and that increases the fog of war because those communication requests are coming in from people who are in extremis. I mean, you've some guy on the radio screaming, my buddy's dead, I'm bleeding, they're shooting at me, I need help. And you've got to translate that into a priority list and a schedule within seconds. Who gets support, how gets support. So that introduces one aspect of fog of war. The other aspect is the literal fog. I said this a couple of years ago about people who were claiming that because they were burning 7 tires across the N2 in a protest, that this was like a war zone. And I said, no. You'll know you're in a war zone when everything is burning. And if you look at images of Gaza at the moment, especially at nighttime, it looks like a sunrise over the city. And that's because everything burns. Everything burns. And that's not talking about the dust and the dust gets stirred up and the smoke and the flames. And it is a literal fog where you literally can't see outside of your little environment where you are. And then on top of that, there's a physiological thing that happens where men specifically develop a tunnel vision and a thing called audio exclusion, where they literally only hear and see what they're focused on, and that's the whole predator thing, whatever. So if you're fighting in one area that's 200 meters square, that is your entire world, and nothing outside of that, unless you are really something really bad happens, did you even notice or see it? And the problem with that is that now you're focusing on the immediate threats. You're focusing on the immediate threats, and you might not see that the second order or third order effects of what you're doing might affect civilians. But what you also might not see is that because you're focusing on the threat, you walk into a trap. Because you walk past a place where people have been hiding, whether it's been underground or above ground or whatever. So all of these are factors. And people who are well trained know how to deal with these factors. Good training includes introducing the whole concept of the fog of war. It introduces the concept of communication not working, radios don't work. People talk over each other on the net, so that's why radio discipline becomes important. There's smoke, and there's fire, and there's noise, and there's all kinds of stuff. People don't understand just how chaotic it is.
And we know when you want, at the time that you actually need your damn radio, the fucking thing doesn't work. And the thing is, the other thing I want to talk about is that people need to realize, and this is talking about people who've never seen combat. this is not Call of Duty. This isn't the movies. It's literally a war. It's a war that's happening, and yes, you've got a professionally trained military that is going in, but they're not going to be 100%. They're not going to do 100% everything correctly. There is going to be mistakes made, and it's hard to kind of expect a huge group of people to be 100% on point all the time. I mean, you've got with all that chaos and stuff like that. I've been shot at before. I know what it's like. I know that I know exactly what you were talking about having that tunnel vision and not focusing on what's going on around you. It's 100-fold worse when you've got explosions, you've got RPGs, you've got to watch out for snipers on the rooftops, you've got to watch out for guys coming out of tunnels. People expecting the Israeli military to be this like 100% well-oiled machine that's never going to make a mistake. It's bullshit. This ideology needs to stop. People need to realize this is a war.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is there've been a lot of studies, and you need to scratch into the academic stuff coming out of the US War College, for example, and various other places, where okay, take a unit of whatever size, say a company size unit, 200 guys and some trained, depending on the structure. It is very clear that a green unit going into a situation is less effective than a veteran unit. They've got it down to percentages, that the average unit is like 60% versus 85%, whatever it is. They have percentages. And that's been the case for a long time. I mean, as much as we can actually study history, and we can actually see, oh, well, at Waterloo, there were so many veteran units. Napoleon had his units with the moustaches, they were his veterans, and how effective they were compared to his non-veteran units or unblooded units, those who in the terms of the time had seen the elephant and who hadn't. And that's been a feature of war for a long time. And there have been all kinds of ways to ameliorate that. What the Americans did in Vietnam was to have individual replacements into units, which had all kinds of other problems. But this has been something that everyone's been aware of, and that's been a constant over many, many years. So something interesting came out of the global war on terror, the Afghanistan, Iraq, 21 years out of war, that is really interesting. Because what happened was, after Mogadishu, the Marines specifically, because I think it fits in their mindset and fits in their attitude, whatever, they started looking at the concept of the two-block war. They started looking at the urban environment. They developed a lot of the concepts to do with MOUT, which, just by the way, they actually based on going back to the 5th Marines in Shanghai between the World Wars, who had also developed some of those same doctrine. And also, by the way, that's where some interesting people were at the time. For example, Fairbairn, who was a member of the Shanghai Peace, and where the Sykes-Fairbairn knife became popular. And they had a doctrine that they developed there that was urban. And so the Marines started out, and part of the influence for their doctrine was that old Marine doctrine from the 5th Marines. And they started training for the possibility of the city fight. And there's lots of academic and papers out there about how they approached it, lots of military papers, how they approached it and what they did. And that was in the 90s. The culmination of that, though, was that at some point during the Afghan and Iraq wars, the totally green units were deploying, and Fallujah being the prime example, Battle of Fallujah being the prime example, and were being as effective, if not more effective, than veteran units. So veteran unit would withdraw, and a completely unblooded green unit would deploy in their place, and they would do relief in the line. And as far as the effectiveness was concerned, there was no discernible difference. And that puzzled a lot of people, and a lot of the people who think about the stuff professionally started writing about it and researching it, and they came to understand that I think it's Fort Polk, subject to correction, they set up that part of the pre-deployment preparation
was training for that environment, and I think it was Fort Parker, it could be somewhere else, that was so realistic that the guys actually, when they actually entered into the real battle, found it to be easier and less stressful than the training had been. And this is something that has been an eye-opener for a lot of people, and I have no doubt that the Israelis have picked up on this a lot because they have a lot of interaction with the US and the US military, and so I have no doubt that their guys are well trained, and that's why they will be effective, and they'll be more effective than somebody who hasn't gone through that kind of preparation would be. I'm a bit concerned though, because as the more current reserves are fatigued and are withdrawn and replaced, you're going to get some of those 150% of guys who have not been active for 10 years, for 15 years. And so while they're good soldiers, they're not at that keen edge and that well-trained edge that maybe the current ones are. So as we go, expect to see a climb, I would speculate, in accidents, in inappropriate decisions, in the casualty rates, in the all of those kind of things. So they're at their peak right now. They've only done one or two exploratory sort of missions in, and now they are really starting with the creating the beachhead, the Navy supporting them from the sea, artillery supporting them from the east. It looks like they're creating a beachhead, and they are isolating a part of Gaza, as you were explaining from the map, and they are starting with very much in the fringes still the hostage rescue thing, and they're at their peak efficiency right now. A week from now, a month from now, 4 months from now, however long it takes, expect that efficiency to decline until it eventually starts increasing again as they adapt and adjust.
And as they advance in, we're going to start seeing the kind of combat that's house to house, building to building. It's a good thing they've got a lot of very good air support coming in. They've always had that advantage. We won't talk about how the scenarios of other forces pulling in from the Jordan area and that yet. There's whispers of it possibly happening, but we don't know yet. As we've seen in the past with the other Arab nations, they tend to be a bit soft when it comes to, they're all back and haven't really, since '67 at least, they haven't gotten involved.
Take note of how tentative Egypt is. And there's a reason that Egypt is so tentative about getting involved at all, because they know that last time they got spanked so badly that they basically funded the whole of the Israeli defense forces, weapons, and what have you for the next 20 years because they lost them all.
Golda Meir saw to it that the Egyptians were on friendly terms since.
Exactly.
Got a little bit shitty with the Muslim Brotherhood, but now it's back again.
Well, that's interesting as well, because that's also why they don't want the Muslim Brotherhood, because they are the local opposition. They are causing trouble for them, and that's why the Hamas are not welcome there, because they know that they are, shall we say, friends with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they know that if they let Hamas in, that they are actually increasing their own internal issues.
And Jordan doesn't want the Palestinians there, and doesn't want their involvement either, because about 80% of the Jordanian population is actually Palestinian. And over the last 10 years or so, or Palestinian heritage, I suppose, but over the last 10 years, the Jordanians have been revoking their citizenship. And there's a lot of people that are sitting stateless. The King of Jordan is kind of Western aligned. He's got good relationships with the Americans. I don't think he wants to fuck that up too much either. They know what's at stake. They've got relative control of where they're sitting with the West Bank area. If need to be, they'll jump in there if they have to. But I don't think they're going to be jumping into Gaza anytime soon.
What's interesting about Jordan, you mentioned the King of Jordan. Going for those listening or watching, go and Google the King of Jordan and his military background and experience.
He's a qualified special forces operator.
He's idealized by his people because he flies planes and shoots tanks and does building clearing and in his uniform, and he knows all the weapons, and he trains with his guys, and they idealize him. They think that he walks on water, but that's not the point. The point is that he has an intimate understanding of his ability to project force, and he has a very intimate understanding of the threat that he faces if he steps over the line. So, Jordan,
Saudi and Jordan are very anti-Iran. They don't want the Iranians involved in and
Yeah.
causing shit for them either. And Iran is probably the biggest sort of wild card out of them all. But I think yeah, we'll discuss it if it gets to that point. I don't think Iran will get
Yes.
involved in any point. If they do get naughty, the Ayatollah is going to get taken out by a drone.
Well, there are two carrier groups stationed there at the moment. It's the Ford and the Geo Ford, and what's the other one? I forget the other one.
Ford is in
People
the
don't understand.
Mediterranean, and Bhutan is in the Mediterranean as well.
Correct. So,
Bantan, or
but people do not understand just how much. I mean, I don't even understand. I mean, I stand in awe at how much firepower and how much, how much firepower one carrier ship actually carries. And if you look carefully at the makeup,
5,000 personnel on one
well,
aircraft
exactly.
carrier.
But I was thinking, like, just one of the ships in the flotilla that isn't even spoken about is a specialist anti-missile firing. So everybody knows. Okay, the big
Yeah, and that's
stick
what
is
they
in
got.
the room.
That's ballistic missiles that headed from Yemen.
The big stick is in the room. So I hope and pray that everybody stays on their side of the line. They allow this thing to play out. They don't get involved, and then we don't have a complete blow up of the whole region. That is my hope. I saw a very interesting debate. There was some guy who was talking about the tunnel rats in Vietnam, etc., etc. And as it happens, I live about 2 clicks away from a retired guy who was one of those guys. And I've had a few beers sitting around talking to him about this before, and absolutely incredible what those guys did. I mean, literally incredible. I take my hat off to them. They were incredibly brave. I have serious doubts whether I would be able to climb down in those tunnels.
Yeah, and those were the Vietnamese that were sort of very rural people, and now you've got Hamas who gets about a 4.8 billion income and spends it on tunnels every year.
But the point I was trying to make is that these are not Vietnam, Viet Cong type tunnels. These are not ad hoc dug out with a frickin' with a bayonet and a tin cup to scrape the sand. These are tunnels that they've been working on for the last, I don't know, 60 years or something stupid, and they're quite large and they're quite sophisticated.
The already existing ones that have been there for the last 1,000 years,
I know,
too.
like 3,000 years. I understand, but what I'm saying is that this is not in any way comparable. We're not going to be sending guys with a knife clenched between their teeth, to crawl down into a black hole. This is not that. I think we're at the point where they're going to send down a freaking remote controlled drone, if anything. No, it's a different time and a different kind of war. I have no doubt.
And we'll start seeing that more and more, I think, as the conflict carries on and what gets released, because the IDF is very good with their OPSEC. We'll see, obviously, maybe after the fact what goes on, or we'll see as it goes on. As they make significant discoveries, we'll probably be alerted towards it. And I want to for a slight, but when it comes to intelligence stuff, like for example the Al Shifa hospital where Hamas has their HQ. The video proof that was released was a 3D rendering. I mean, they obviously know what it looks like. Why not release those pictures to show that what's there?
Yeah.
They've got their intelligence assets, and that's another thing. The intelligence assets that the IDF also has on the ground is quite extensive, and they're not going to play those cards. I don't think we'll ever see them playing those cards and say this is what came from my
okay. So for people to maybe understand what you're talking about, okay, go and watch that TV series Founder. The Founder TV series is literally the ongoing sort of backwards and forwards in these areas. It covers a lot of these kind of topics, obviously prior to what's happened now, in a very intimate kind of way, because it focuses on just a few people in a small team and the kind of things that go on with them, their personal lives and what they do and all the rest of it. And why I mention that is because one of those actors and founder got activated, and he's a quite senior officer in one of their quite elite units. And there was a photograph released about a week or two back of him standing. And what's interesting about the photograph is I see him standing there.
Is he in the military or is it
Military? So he was an actor and founder.
Okay.
Got activated for this current conflict, and I now see a photograph of him
in Israel.
His uniform in Israel, standing there.
Yeah.
And you and I both know, I look at the guys around him, and both of us will look at those guys and we go, okay, door kickers. The attitude, what they're wearing, I mean, there's a guy behind him with a beard slightly bigger than mine and grayer than mine.
Yeah.
But, you can just see just from that one photograph, you can go Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
And so why I say that is it gives a legitimacy to, he's an actor acting out what is a real role, and his background for that is the real deal. He literally lives, eats and breathes that stuff in real life. He's just not portraying that on the screen. So while it's obviously scripted and acted and there's fictionalized all the rest of it, as a kind of exposure to the kind of complexities, it's really cool, and it gives you a really good idea of who the players are, etc. I mean, I remember being in Jerusalem in the 90s and sitting and having dinner with some of my colleagues, and we were at this like square, and there was all restaurants around the square, and it started raining. And one of the guys from the one side walked over to a girl at a table on the other side and put out his hand and asked her to dance. The two of them did this dance in the rain in the middle of the square. It looked and felt like something out of the movies. And it just so happened, one of the people that were with us was saying, he's a Jew and she's an Arab, dancing in the rain at night in Jerusalem. The complexities that people think it's black and white. It's really not. It is really, really, really not. And this is the problem.
You go through a place, an area in Israel called Mir Sharim. That's home to ultra Orthodox Jews, Haredim.
Yes.
If you walk there with your cell phone out, you're going to get shit. They'll smack it out your hand, or you'll get into shit. But
Correct.
You walk into the neighborhoods and you'll see Palestinian flags painted on the walls. You'll see Palestinian flags flying off their houses. These are ultra Orthodox Jews with the coats, the beard, the hair, the locks, everything, that are totally hatefully anti the state of Israel, anti-Zionism.
Yes.
This is the middle of Israel.
Yes.
It's such a complicated society. You've got Israeli Arabs that will not be even remotely supportive
that serve in the IDF, for example.
Pardon?
Israeli Arabs that serve in the IDF, for example.
Yeah. Oh, the Bedouins serving in the IDF. The Bedouins are some of the best trackers in the world.
Well, what's interesting, I often tell the story about the Israeli airlift of 40,000 Ethiopians out of Ethiopia, because they're considered in some ways to be the lost tribe. And so what's interesting is that it cuts across the racial, it cuts across the ethnic, it cuts across all of that stuff. And people have this weird conception about so-called apartheid and all the rest of it. And it's like, you cannot make the comparison because it is a completely different level of complexity. And coming back to the military, okay, so part of the problem is that people don't understand just how small Israel is. I remember driving up and standing on the edge of the Golden Heights and looking down, and in front of me, I don't know, freaking 800 meters down the little hill, there's the Sea of Galilee, and I see, there's the River Jordan running. And I'm standing there, and essentially 90% of the economic and economically viable, the active farmland, the cities, etc., are within range of a G5 artillery piece standing on the Golden Heights.
Yeah.
And then when you stand on the ground as a soldier and you look at the ground like all infanteers do, the first thing you look at is the terrain. And you realize there are certain things that are critical to their survival. Having the Golan Heights is the only high ground that dominates the entire country.
Yeah.
If you let that go, you're giving away the country. Then you look at things like how close the borders run. I mean, from one step you can go from Syria, to Israel, to Gaza, it's within 100 meters. And it was like when I got to see the biblical city of Jericho, where the walls fell down. Dude, that place, the entire biblical city of Jericho is like 30, 40 meters square. It's tiny, 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 tiny. And yet I think it's in Gaza, but it's a Palestinian place.
In the West Bank, yeah.
Yeah, in the West Bank.
Yeah,
it's a Palestinian place.
For some of the woke Americans that are now watching this ready to rage, there's a big difference between where Gaza is and where the West Bank is. The West Bank is governed by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Fatah, and Gaza kicked out Fatah, and Hamas is now there with Islamic Jihad. It's two different places, very, very far from each other. And how small everything.
But the point is that when you say very, very far, that's probably 20 kilometers.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So this is the other thing is that what we call Israel now, if you exclude the desert in the south, is smaller than any major European town, the entire country.
Yeah.
And once you start understanding that, and you start understanding some of the issues. Oh, to come back quickly to the actual fight, which is something that I meant to mention that I forgot. Part of the problem about the city fight is what the buildings are made of. And in the South African context, you go into a township, whatever, you're talking about walls made out of corrugated iron. You cannot shoot anything there because you're going to go through 15 houses. Going into, if you look at Second World War, marching towards Berlin, the various city fights that happened there, then we talk about brick houses and all that kind of stuff. And so between the two sits the typical Middle Eastern half mud, half stone, half rock kind of building. And that makes life difficult as well, because sometimes you can shoot out, one corner and the entire block collapses. Sometimes you shoot and it's all rock inside there and nothing gets through. And other times you just like poke your finger and it poke someone's eye out in the other side of the wall because it's so soft and sandy. That's a major added complication. Just as an aside.
Oh, so before I got load shedding, now we got probably about 5 minutes left. Sort of my prediction on this whole thing is that we're going to see similar stuff happening to what's happened before. Israel is going to hammer them hard. There's going to be, at some point, someone's going to come to an agreement. There's going to be a ceasefire. They're going to put up white flags. And in a year's time, we're going to kind of forget about it and talk about this when it happens again.
I agree with you, Tim. I agree with you up to a point. I agree with you up to a point. But let me make another point. And this is pure speculation on my behalf. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Do you remember the assassination squads that hunted the Nazis up into the 90s?
Yeah.
I think we're in that situation right now. The people that were involved, people sitting in Qatar, the people that planned this, that supported this, they need to actually, for the rest of their lives, look over their shoulders.
And they do, because one of the Munich attackers that managed to escape spent the rest of I think he's still alive. He might have died recently, but he said that for his entire life, he spent his entire life looking over his shoulder, and that's a cuck way to live.
It is.
And they didn't take these guys out in simple ways, bullet to the back of the head. They rigged up wires from one building to the other side of the building and jerry-rigged a fucking egg beater with a bomb on the end of it.
Cell phones and all kinds of nonsense.
They're going to take these guys out, and it's not going to be pleasant. And no one's going to know who did it. They're going to suspect. We're going to know it was Mossad, but we're not going to be able to confirm it. And these guys need to be worried about that. And to be honest, any kind of terrorist that does this kind of thing doesn't deserve to continue living. And if people don't like it, they can cry me a river. I really don't give a shit.
Exactly. I think that people have they've gotten There's that lovely Afrikaans phrase, alles no mock. They have forgotten what it means. They've forgotten what the term never again means. They've forgotten the oath that Israeli soldiers take when they stand on Masada. Masada shall never fall again. They've forgotten that this is not the Polish ghetto, that after the Polish ghetto, where they were disarmed and they walked as willingly into the cattle carts, this is not the same people. The pogroms in Russia, this is not the same people. These are people who've taken a stand and have made a there is a line in the sand for them. And I think that people don't understand just quite how badly Hamas have screwed up.
It's not even necessarily just Israelis. It is every single Jew on every corner of the face of the earth. If they are under threat, the Israeli government and Israeli people have made the decision that they will do anything to protect those people. Well, never again means exactly that.
Never again. Because this is, yes. But now okay, maybe this is too broad and maybe you should touch on it quickly. The scenes that we've been seeing of like students outside the opera house in Australia chanting "Gas the Jews." The idiots on various campuses across the US being, showing their true colors that they support terrorists in the way that they have, and the whining and the moaning about the backlash has been. There's been a certain amount of schadenfreude, I must say, about the fact that yes, you're free to speak, but no, you're not free from the consequences of your speech. So that's been interesting to watch. What is distressing me somewhat is just how, maybe that's the wrong way to think of it. What is happening is that the anti-Semitism is being properly exposed now, and people can't hide away from that. And be careful because the memory hole, people are trying to put it in the memory hole and they're trying to gaslight it and what have you. But those of us who watch, we won't forget. Okay. Last 2-minute thought is this. Last night, I raised my glass to those who have died in defense of Israel, in defense of their people, and I will do it again for those who are they're standing on the wall, they are holding the line, they are the sheepdogs. My respect, my condolences, and my support.
Yeah, and I mean, from my side, I mean, the loss of human life is always tragic. The loss of innocent human life is always tragic. But this is a war that's happened. People may not have called for it, but the people that started it are certainly going to learn when it gets finished. They're going to learn it very hard.
Agreed.
So yeah, Israel doesn't care about what the rest of the world says. They're going to do what they're going to do regardless of the protesting and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, always good chatting, John. Have a lekker one.
Good chatting. Awesome, buddy.
But that's this episode. We'll obviously bring John back again as soon as more sort of information comes in. As always, thanks for tuning in and thanks for being around on the show. Hit that like and subscribe button. I don't expect people to agree with what we've said. Everyone's got their own opinions. But as always, just keep them respectful. And you're allowed to think what you want to think. You're allowed to take sides on this one. But always be respectful. And it's just incredibly sad that it's had to come to this and that we're seeing loss of human life, innocent human lives. As always, stay safe. Be good, and we'll catch you on the next one.